Let's talk about Rishi Sunak, or as Joe Biden called him, Rashid Sunak.
Rashid Sunak.
I think that's what he called him. And Biden was just like, I mean, when he mentioned him, it's like, he's the leader of the Conservative Party. And who'd have thought? It was like, it's mind-blowing to...
Well, I mean, a bit like America, the non-white vote has been trending towards the right for a little while in Britain. So
yes, especially Asian immigrants and people who are doing well in business. Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing a shift. We're actually seeing quite a shift.
That's Sunak's background, of course. I mean, he was a financier. He was a city analyst. He's very much a man with California sensibilities. He loves that tech world. He went to Stanford. That's where he met his wife. And a lot of focus is put on, the fact that his father-in-law runs one of the largest companies in India and his wife's worth $1 billion. But Sunak himself Ted was easily the richest MP in Britain before he got married. So he'd done well. And, that's his kind of world, the sort of movers and shakers, that sort of international cosmopolitan set, the tech bros. And that's very much that kind of work hard, play hard Indian culture. His parents saved all the money they had to send him to Winchester College, which is, it's one of the big three for your American listeners. It's, Eton would still be regarded as the most prestigious, but I think people from Winchester would say that they were cleverer and the ones who solved the world's problems. The Harrovians, Winston Churchill was a Harrovian, and they're sort of disappearing. There's an old joke about a woman at a party needs a chair, and the Winchester guy says to the Harrovian, go and fetch the chair, and then the Etonian sits in it. So it's that kind of, the Etonians have the presumption, but the Wickhamists, as they call the people from Winchester, have the sort of the problem solving in the brains. And that's very much how Rishi Sunak sees himself. And he came into government as a kind of problem solver. He'd worked at a lot of the big banks, and he came with that sort of, I am here to fix things kind of approach that you often hear from business people. Why can't we have more of these business people in politics? Well, the reason not a lot of them are very successful is that they lack the politics. And so it has proved with Sunak.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to him, he comes from an immigrant family of his second generation, and his parents were wealthy and prosperous as chemists, as pharmacists, but he kind of made his own money in his own way in the world in general. So, but the thing about him, when I watched him, is he doesn't seem to have any. Well, he's an opposite of Boris. He has no connection to most people. He just feels like a sort of eager schoolboy in some ways, giving you his report that's super slick and nicely put together, and you just don't connect with him at all. Again, it's so strange that a Conservative Party that had kind of remade itself as a populist party, a nationalist populist party, would suddenly then go for which implies a certain amount of, as in America, a republicanism or a conservatism that doesn't mind spending money, and that also concentrates on the working classes in a way it hasn't. So you think, oh, there's a coherent thing coming here, and then Truss comes in with old school supply side shock therapy, and then Sunak comes in as a sort of technocrat to manage the mess with no political skill. It's absolutely no mystery to me why they're going down in flames. Of course, the other thing is that they have been in power for 14 years, and that is about as long as you possibly stay in power, I think, in the UK and not become a complete ship of fools.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Boris Johnson was very clever. His political genius was to convince the public that his was a very new government that looked very different from what had gone before with David Cameron and Theresa May. It felt like a new thing. So even though it was a kind of third, fourth term government, it didn't feel that way to the public. It felt like they'd got something different. It doesn't feel like that at all now. And Sunak, has inherited all these problems. But, part of the explanation, of course, is how he got the job. He was never elected by anybody. The Conservative Party voted overwhelmingly for Liz Truss because they tend to elect the more right-wing person that's put in front of them, and the grassroots has the power. The MPs preferred Sunak, but the grassroots membership, which is not Trumpian, but there are similarities in some regards in terms of their sensibilities. And they didn't pick Sunak. Sunak, of course, spent most of that campaign explaining why Truss was going to be a disaster. That wasn't very popular with those grassroots people. But afterwards, he was able to turn around and say, look, I was right about this. But bluntly, it still came down to a game of power politics. Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson got in a room. When trust fell, Boris flew back from the Dominican Republic where he was on holiday. And for 48 hours, you basically had the leadership of Britain decided, in smoke-filled rooms for the first time since 1963,